May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free from harm. May all beings love life. May all beings awaken. Welcome to another Cuke Audio podcast. I'm DC Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, coming to you from Sleepy Sanur with Dogga Bandita, Feline Cuchita, and dear lovely Katrinka. I pray that you and yours are safe and comfortable and free from economic distress and able to get out and do whatever it is you want within the limitations of the universal precept of do as little harm as possible. Today we have a guest, Paul Discoe. Paul Discoe came to Tassajara before we had started the first practice period. He came in with his wife, Ruthie, and he ended up getting ordained by Shunryu Suzuki as a priest and became our master builder and was in charge of building the kitchen there. And he also was the main advisor for getting the gardens going, I'd say. He sort of knew the physical world very, very well and how to deal with it. And he was sharp cookie, and he still is, as you will see. Before Suzuki died, Paul went to Japan, and we get into his study of temple carpentry in Japan in this. And then after, God, I don't know how many years. I don't think I asked him, 5 years or something. He came back and did some building for Zen Center, and at some point went out on his own and started joinery structures located in Oakland, and had one high-profile job in charge of building Larry Ellison's estate in Mountain View, I think, which ended up costing $200 million. So he talks about that and his 20 years of relating with Larry Ellison. So, and also, early on, I get him to talk about his community in Oakland. Well, it's not a living community, it's a business community called O2. And here, one second. Okay, here we are. I looked it up online to get it right. The website for it is O2, as in oxygen. It's the O2 Artisan's Aggregate. So the website is o2aa.com. The website, when Paul talks about it, that'll give you an idea. Hey, look, I'll read you 3 short paragraphs they have here on the homepage. O2AA, an eco-industrial park located in West Oakland, is home to a network of artisans working collectively to develop and promote environmentally progressive projects. The systems created at O2 enable tenants and the community to utilize alternative energies and reduce and upcycle various waste streams. Organized by the founder of joinery structures, Paul Discoe. The aggregate is comprised of tenants who practice interactive and sustainable methods by sharing spaces, resources, tools, and machinery. A core team of project developers works on site to incubate and manage new efforts, as well as expand the scope and scale of O2AA. Some of our systems include aquaponic gardening and fish farming, solar power production, wastewater digestion for reuse, the construction of a community kitchen space, biochar, and biochip production, composting facilities, and upcycling food waste to create a sustainable animal feed. All right. Hey, look, I'm looking down a little further. Current artisans and projects. Paul Discoe Design Studio and Prototype Shop. God, it's beautiful. Iron Grain Inc., Ponderosa Millworks, Soba Ichi Restaurant, Juniper Ridge, Wild Crafting Studio. Well, listen, there's a bunch of them listed. Okay, well, you go there and you can read more about it. That's pretty cool. And I asked him about his book, Zen Architecture. You can get it by writing to him, and you can get it for half price. It's it's a nice book. It retailed at $40. He sells it for $20. Look, I didn't ask him how people contact him, but right here on the website, he gives an address, 234 Magnolia Street, Oakland, California, 94607. All right. So I think that's a good enough introduction. So let's give Paul a call and see what he has to say after our pause to meditate. So when you hear the bell, hit pause if you're of such a mind, and meditate or whatever for as long as you wish. And when you are finished and ready to return, hit unpause, and we'll hit the bell to end meditation and give Paul a ring.
Hello.
Hey, Paul. David, how you doing?
Oh, hi, David. You found me.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, finally. Are you doing any work now?
I have designed projects, and then I'm remodeling the backyard here.
And I'm sure you've got a little farm, and you said you had chickens going there in Berkeley.
Well, I'm here at my girlfriend's house in West Oakland, East Oakland now, and I'm putting in some raised beds and starting a little vegetable garden going. I always like to do a little farming and putting in a fish pond and.
I wanted to ask you. Well, I want to ask you everything, but I wanted to ask you about O2 first.
Okay, sure.
So, Could you describe what O2 is?
Well, it started out 20 years ago as just a piece of property to to have a sawmill on to saw up urban logs that were being thrown away normally. And it just by total coincidence it belonged to my father's second wife's sister and her husband, who I'd never met before, since I hadn't seen my father for 50 years, and
Wow.
it was just 2 blocks away from the workshop that I bought in 1995. So 5 years later, I bought this place in 2000 from relatives that I never met, relatives by marriage that I never met. But since I was family, of course, I got to go to the head of the line. I got first right of refusal, so I was able to buy us 2.5 acres, most of the city block, in this old beat-up industrial part of West Oakland, where it was mostly a black neighborhood at that time, and white people were scared to go there, but it was perfectly safe. It was just the other side of racism. You know, that people unrealistically scared of black people.
Uh-huh.
Anyway,
Uh-huh.
so the price was really cheap. So it was quite cheap, fortunately, and so I bought it, and I was busy doing other things, and so I didn't do much with it at all. I just sort of rented it out casually to pay the mortgage, and set up the sawmill there. But the rest of it, I don't know, people just, I let it go. There was a guy growing dope there, and there was a sewer contractor, and I know that there's a variety of people in there, and then when I retired some 6 years ago or so, I decided to move my office over there and leave my main workshop 2 blocks away, and try to get Michael Coonan to get my stepson to run it, or get somebody to run it, so I could retire. And then I started fixing it up slowly, and then I got this idea that making it more of a practice place, of a shukyo place, in the sense of motai-nai, of not wasting. So the emphasis there is on reuse and recycle and making stuff out of things that nobody else wants. And it's just sort of an ad hoc group of various different craftspeople.
How, so there's different workshops and stores in it, or?
Workshops mostly. I try to discourage storage. I try to discourage artists. I want craftspeople, people that make something.
Uh-huh.
And I discourage nonprofits. I want people that make something that they can make a living doing, not their hands out.
Well,
After seeing what happened to Zen Center, I got very discouraged with nonprofit.
well,
They start to identify with their donors, and then it's all petty bourgeois morality from there on out.
Ivan Illich is my favorite quote from Ivan Illich is, all institutions inevitably come to thwart the purpose for which they were founded.
Yes, that's true. But some of them last longer than others.
Yeah. Well, who else is there? Can you give an example?
Sure. I see. I can go. I have a restaurant that grinds soba seeds into soba flour and makes a handmade soba, and along with other Japanese it's a soba restaurant of handmade soba, but freshly ground flour. So I bought all the grinding material from Japan, so it cleans it and whittles it and polishes it and grinds it and sifts it and so forth. And then this fellow that trade in Japan makes it and they sell it. So there's a restaurant there.
What's the name of it? What's the name of it?
Soba Ichi.
Uh-huh.
And now there's a fellow that's into. It's not really vegan because he has eggs, but it's a vegetarian pizza anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, wood-fired pizza. He's doing that, and then there's a woman that grows flowers for sale, and plant starts, and then there's the guys that are doing it. You bring your bottle and they refill it with shampoo or oil or not oil, like not food stuff, but soaps and oils and that kind of thing. They refill the containers so you don't have to use a new container.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some people down that brew up this god-awful concoction of all different kinds of oceanic byproducts, crab shells and God knows what else, and make this high-potency fertilizer.
Oh.
Bioflux, they're called. And then there's a group of 5 metal workers that make metal, all different kinds of metal work. And there's one artist. There's a woman that is actually a sculptor that's actually an artist, not a fabricator, but she can fabricate as well. And then I have my food scrap to animal feed processing plant there. That's something that's since I've slowed down, it's hard for it to operate. And there's a woman there, a Native American and a black woman couple that he fishes and she processes the fish there and sells them at farmers markets. And then there's 3 women. One of them is absolutely drop dead gorgeous young women that go out in the ocean and gather seaweed and process it and make a snack food out of it.
Oh wow!
And
a lot of that here.
And then there's a shop. Oh, you know seaweed gathering down in Bali?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Or drop dead young women.
Both. Yes, very true.
And then there's a wood shop with 3 woodworkers in it, and then there's a aquaponics, fish and plants growing together, and more garden stuff, and a greenhouse around there. And then there's a sawmill where they saw up urban trees, and then there's a stonemason that does mostly restoration work, and then there's a sake brewery that brews small batch handmade sake. And then there is another aquaponics set up with fish and plants, greenhouse and fish working off of each other, and a charcoal making operation out of the wood scraps from the sawmill, and then a fairly large company that makes scented soaps out of natural forage material, sagebrush and tree trimmings and various things. They have big kilns where they get the essential oils from these wild harvested products and then add them to soap and to various perfumes. And anyway, it's called Juniper Ridge. They sell it in Europe. It's sold nationwide. And then there's a ceramicist, a potter that does mostly ware for restaurants. And then there's a metal fabricator that does wood and metal fabrications, sort of unusual large, staircases and pergolas and various different unusual wood metal objects. And there's a blacksmith, and there's 2 sewers. There's 2 people that sew. One of them sews bags and tents and stuff. The other one sews Japanese garments. And then there's a woman that grows mealworms for human food. Anyway, that's kind of the range.
Wow.
And there's me and my design firms there. Although now we're working from home, but I was there.
That's very impressive. You got
and
more?
we have chickens. We have chickens with the vegetable. We have a CSA box, that people buy once a week. It has vegetables and chicken.
What?
CSA.
What's that?
What does it stand for? I forget now.
What does it mean?
Community. You know what it means, Benita? Anyway, it's a box of vegetables that farms grow, and that people subscribe to it. And they come get their box once a week.
Yeah. Huh. Sure.
Anyway, we have chicken eggs and quail eggs, and various different kinds of vegetables, and the soaps available there, and that kind of thing.
Wow, that is very impressive. Um,
So it's so now my what I'm trying to find out how to set up is some sort of a program that will keep it alive for a little while anyway if I'm not around.
yeah,
And like as you say, it's hard to it's hard to create an organization, especially if it's small, that'll
right.
persist in the midst of the flux of the society.
That I've seen that. People creating really great things, uh, and trying to make it where they continue, and that's very hard to do.
Very hard, yeah. But that's right. I'll be dead, so I won't worry about it too much.
Well, O2, and where does the name O2 come from?
Well, it was an oxygen plant, so it's like oxygen is O2.
Mm-hmm.
Oxygen occurs in a combination of two oxygens, and ozone is one oxygen that's very dangerous. And also, I bought it in the year 2000, and it's O2 Artisan's Aggregate, and and it's O to do this and O to do that, sort of. Anyway, it's just O2.
And it's did you say West Oakland?
West Oakland, yeah, right near the Bay Bridge.
Ah, yeah. Wow. That's very interesting. Immediately what comes to mind is some people I think that I should send over there. That's really interesting. God, I wish I could see it. Now, well, what's happening? Are people going to work there now?
Yeah, it pretty much, it's almost all single proprietors or just a few employees, and they're continuing to work.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I wanted to ask you about your book too. What's you put out a actually I've got a copy. You put out a book on your design and building work. What was it called? What is it called?
It's called Zen Architecture.
Uh-huh.
I wanted to call it Zen Wood, but they didn't. The publisher didn't like that.
Huh, 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 huh. Uh-huh. Yeah, publishers get to choose the titles. Uh,
Yeah.
but usually I think the author wins out, but not always. Um, what it, tell us about that book. It's really beautiful. It's a big book.
Yeah. Well, Gibbs Smith was the publisher, and Gibbs Smith had gone down to Tassajara. Are you familiar with Gibbs Smith, the publisher?
I
His
know of
books.
him. I might have met him. I can't remember.
Well, anyway, but he did a lot of architectural books, a lot of art books. He did also some silly cowboy books. He lived in Salt Lake City. He's an old time Salt Lake City person with the name of Smith, but pretends like he has nothing to do with Mormons. But anyway, I never got to the bottom of that. But we hung out together quite a bit at various times. But anyway, he's now departed.
Oh, he is. Gibbs Smith has.
Yeah.
Oh.
Anyway, he went to Tassajara, and he liked it there, and he liked the buildings there, and then he came to me and said, "You should write a book about all this." I said, "No, I don't. I'm a woodworker. I don't write books." And he pestered me about it for some time, and I thought, well, I should not. I should do. I should do what's I should do what's difficult. I should go against the grain.
Yeah.
If I'm going to be a Zen practitioner, I shouldn't say no to something that I think is not my choice. And so So I started writing. I just wrote in longhand. I started writing, and because I have lots of harebrained philosophies about almost everything, of course,
Uh-huh.
and so I just started writing it out in longhand. I can't spell because I'm dyslexic, and I can't, and I would just write, and then I would organize a little bit, and then there was this woman that I knew who was translating poetry from Italian and French into English,
Mm-hmm.
and so I hired her to help me as an editor, and she translated my gibberish by writing into English sentences, and and then then Gibb Smith hired a photographer, and I went around with her. We did a lot of photography, and we had some archival stuff, but mostly we put into the photographs. And then I put it on the wall. I had a long wall in the house. I pasted it up on the wall, organized it, and moved around, and you know, organized the book that way
You put
with
it
the
on a
photographs and the
wall.
writing.
Now I've put them on the
Yeah,
floor or
oh yeah,
here. I put a book together recently, and there's like a co-working area near here, and they have
yeah,
I got it's great, $3.50 a day to be in this
yeah,
special area, and I got like three long tables and put the whole book
yeah.
out
The
on it.
tables would be good, yeah, but didn't have tables. I had a long wall in the hallway that wasn't used much, so I just taped it to the wall.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
anyway, and then I put it together as a sort of a handmade book, and then they hired a book designer. Gibb Smith hired a book designer who was somebody I knew. I mean, I suggested the book designer, and they unfortunately knew nothing about woodworking or architecture or anything. So I went and sat with them and helped them get the right captions on the right page, put things together in a
Uh huh.
way that made sense. So I had a large hand in the book design as well, and that was basically it.
Anybody I might know designer?
No, I don't think so. I can't. He, he was a nice fellow, but kind of he taught at the CCA, the art school.
Uh huh.
Um, I can't think of his name right now. He's kind
It'll
of
be in the book.
he's,
It'll be in the book.
he's one of those gay fuddy-duddy types. I don't know. Anyway, all full of good intentions and bright cheerfulness, and kind of a dunce. But anyway, but he had the facilities and the staff to get it done.
Ah, wow. Now is Zen Architecture still in print?
It went the first printing of 6,000 went out, and then they held back 1,000, and were selling them on the secondary market, on the the eBay market, for twice the price. Because that's how they were making extra their money. The publishing business is really hard pressed, and they do everything they can to gyp the authors and to squeeze more money out and whatever. Anyway, so it was hard to get, and the price was high, and I just wanted to get it out there. So I made a deal with them. We both put in money and had another 6,000 copies printed, and I took half of them. So I have several cases of them, and the rest of them are on the market.
Oh, you only have several cases. That's pretty good. That's the old-fashioned way of doing it. These days you just do print on demand. When somebody wants one, you get it printed up. But the old-fashioned way prints higher quality books
Yeah, yeah,
by
yeah.
far.
This is a little higher quality book. Yeah.
Yeah. Um. All right.
Anyway, it's only like $8 a copy, and I use them sort of like business cards to hand them out.
$8 a copy. That's really cheap.
That's for my price.
Wow. Oh,
Yeah, I thought it was reasonable, but that
I
that
mean,
was
it's
for a
got
pretty
color
good.
pictures,
That was a
man.
pretty. That was a pretty printing of 6,000, and it printed 6,000 to get that price. But
Doesn't it have color photographs?
yeah, it's got good paper, colored photographs. So it's a very
Good.
very well done book.
$8. That's really cheap. um, what was the retail price of it?
40.
How much?
Retail was 40. Wholesale was 20. No, no, I sell it for 20 at my office.
20 is a very reasonable price for that book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
20 is a reasonable price. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Good Lord. Indeed.
But most of what the book is about the Genjo koan, and that's sort of the hallmark of the book.
Okay. Okay.
And
Let's
it's just
hear about that.
and I just use the various different buildings, and I talk about it how the design evolved from letting the environment tell me what to do.
Mm.
So that was the main gist of the book, is that listening to the environment, listening to all the voices tell you what the building should be. Them just letting that, rather than you have some idea and bringing it forward and imposing that on the situation.
Mm. Mm.
So it was just one illustration of that after the other, but with some stories and little fluff stuck in between.
Wow. I want to see it now. Katrinka's in America. I might be able to get her to bring it back to me here, but she's got so much she's been stuck over there.
Well, send me your address and I'll mail you one.
Oh no! Don't mail it here. Good Lord. Uh,
Why not?
well, okay, okay. Yeah, all right. I'll email it to you. All right. Wow.
Yeah,
Cool.
email your address.
Yeah. Um, don't make it look new. They'll charge me for it. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Don't make it look like
Yeah,
a new
yeah,
retail product.
yeah.
um, yeah, sometimes you can get some manufacturers, if it's somebody you can deal with, to repackage things you're buying to send them here. Because you can get something without any hassle, just comes to the door, or you can get a notice to go to the post office. Then you have to rebuy it.
Oh yeah.
um,
Yeah.
now you
Yeah.
said the book was. Uh, what was the role of the Gensho koan with the books in architecture?
I was using the teaching of the Genjo koan as a design approach.
And could you elaborate on that? I mean, you already talked about letting
Well,
the
I'd have to
environment
I'd have
tell
to
you
I'd
what.
have to go I'd have to go get a copy of that. I'm gonna go get a copy of. I mean, if I paraphrase it, I'll get a little garbled. But anyway, do you have a Shobogenzo of Moon of the Dewdrop or something there in your where you are?
Uh, no, no, no.
Okay. Well, anyway, okay. I'll go in the other room. I'll go to my office and find it. Hang on.
All right, yeah, sure, yeah.
So I spent an hour with Reb this morning discussing the nature of consciousness.
Wow. That,
He has a class every Friday of his students, and I have a personal class with him once a month, and I'm really interested in this. There's so much talk about consciousness now in the scientific world,
mm-hmm.
neuroscientists, and In my office, I have a whole wall of baby pictures of babies of friends, of people I've known that are just born, like newborn pictures.
Yeah.
They're so obvious that they come with something. They're not blank slates. They come with something.
Yes.
And let's see now. God, this book
well
is maddening because it's all in English, and I learned all these names in Japanese. Let's see. Let me get the other book. Let me get. Where is it now? Where is this? Anyway, so we're talking about the wild fox koan, about Dogen's interpretation of the wild fox story. And he has two different versions of it in Shobogenzo, and they were left out. And some of the earlier editors left them out because they thought they were too strange. Page 69. And Dogen tells the story two different ways, also at two different times. Hang on, I'm gonna put it down. So this is the one. Suzuki Roshi used to quote this all the time before we knew that it was Dogen.
Mm-hmm.
As all things are Buddha Dharma, there is delusion and there's realization, practice and birth and death, and there are Buddhas and sentient beings. As the myriad things are without an abiding self, there is no delusion, no realization, no Buddha, no sentient beings, no birth, no death. The Buddha way is basically leaping clear of the many and the one. Thus there is birth and death, delusion and realization, sentient beings and Buddhas. Yet in attachment blossoms fall, and in aversion weeds spread. He used to say that was one of his. He used to like to say that a lot. Anyway, so then it says to carry yourself forward and experience myriad things is delusion. That myriad things come forth and experience themselves is awakening. So that's the line that I was working with.
Yeah. Okay. Oh. That.
So let the myriad things come forth and express themselves, and then that's and you work with that.
Yeah. 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 Wow. That's good. I appreciate that.
But I never said that in the book. I mean, I never alluded to that. You know, I never alluded to Dogen I did allude to Dogen briefly in the beginning, but anyway, but I didn't. It wasn't. I didn't. Anyway, I didn't. I wasn't explicit about it.
So, what's the name of your business now?
My business now. My business before was what was it? It was. Why? I'm blanking on it. That's amazing.
I can tell you.
30 years. 30
Joinery
years of
Structures.
Right. Joinery Structures. That's right. Joinery Structures, and our motto was. Process is our product.
Good motto. You could
anyway,
sell.
anyway.
You should trademark that and sell it.
Yeah, great. I'm not good at selling anything.
Yeah,
Anyway,
me either.
and then the company I have now is Paul Discoe Design.
Yeah. And
then O2 AA LLC is the, and then I have the restaurants, the two restaurants, and the soba mill.
Yeah.
They're also part owners in.
And
the restaurants are taking a beating in this pandemic.
Oh yeah. Oh gosh. Um, 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 can now can you tell anything about any of the customers or any of the work you've done as Paul Disco Design?
As Paul Disco Design, let's see. Um, well, let's see. I did the Berkeley Art Museum, new foyer and bookstore and reception desk.
Ah,
I did a an experimental building in Ukiah where I did a class of 20 people that ended up being more like 10, all out of found objects. We built a house up in Ukiah, a lot of found objects as a class. Um, I've I've done I've done the restaurants. I've done. I'm trying to remember now. Um, right now, I'm doing a wellness center in Portola Valley. That's about
mm,
6,000 square foot building. That's um, going to have a a a kind of psychic healing and yoga uh, uh, portion to it.
mm-hmm.
Um, I'm doing a vegan restaurant in La Honda. I'm doing a Japanese house in Stinson Beach. I'm
Oh,
doing a
wow.
I'm doing one of my doing a version of my modular house in I was just there yesterday in up there where Sim is in Inverness.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's a version of your what house?
I did this modular house.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember. I've
It's in
seen
the
him.
book. It's in the
Yeah.
book. Yeah. Well, it never really took off. I must have I spent a lot of money on it, built designing it all and everything. And I built maybe 8 of them, but it never. I was not, either. It was not. It was. I was not letting things advance and tell me I had an idea, and I was pushing it forward, and it didn't fit the environment. And
Yeah.
so I violated my own philosophy there, and it it was just a little too expensive for poor people and not fancy, not special enough for rich people. Sort
Yeah.
of fell in between there, and I did about 8 of them, but that's anyway. It never really took off.
And they were made from pretty much recycled wood, right?
Oh, they're made from trees of the urban forest. Yeah,
Yeah.
local trees cut up. Yeah.
Yeah. That otherwise would have been thrown out,
And yeah, yeah.
put in landfill or
Except now,
whatever.
except now they've become fashionable. I've seemed to accept that's now a fashion statement to have that kind of wood. But there's people like Evan Shively that start to make big money off of it now.
Well, yeah, that's inevitable.
Yeah.
Um, Well, now, so you know what occurs to me. I've known a number of architects. We know some of them together, and they went to architecture school. You didn't go to architecture school. As a matter of fact, you didn't, like me. I went to a little college, but basically I didn't go to college. You didn't go to college, and
Yeah, I went to a little
you
college too.
you went to a little college, and
Small.
but you've written a book on architecture, and you've done some pretty formidable design work. You haven't even mentioned some of it. That's quite impressive.
A lot of the stuff I did is joinery structures. I'm just talking about stuff. You asked me what I've done as Paul Disco design.
Yeah. Well, go back to joinery
Uh,
structures and tell what joinery structures did.
well, I well I there's lot of that's in the book. Um, the Ellison project's in the book, and the house in Sevastopol's in the book, and the Napa house is in the book, and a lot of all that's in the book. But the Ellison project was 10 years, $200 million 3-bedroom house.
Larry Ellison, founder of
Oracle.
Oracle, right,
Oracle.
right, right.
Yeah.
And I was honored to have a tour of it. Uh, well, you were quite well along with it. It was so impressive. How's it going?
Well, I don't see him anymore, of course, um, but he's sired a couple of more children by this Eurasian woman apparently,
Uh-huh.
and I have some of my ex-employees still do maintenance work down there, and some of my friends are also. I have a Russian mathematician friend that's working on some project he's doing to develop a chemical or a substance or a method that will dissolve anything. Um,
Is the idea
anyway,
to dissolve plastic or something? Or?
I don't know. I don't. He was somewhat flip about it. But they hired a whole sort of think tank to come up with some new idea. Apparently, the story is that his big shot friends are all saying, "Well, you never came up with anything new. You're just using old technology, that technology that you took from IBM." And so he's trying to come up with something that
Oh yeah.
new that nobody else has. That's the story. I don't know how true it is.
Well,
But you know,
um,
and I told you that story about Dick and Larry Ellison, right?
no, no. Tell me. Well, I don't know. Maybe you did.
I,
I just, right now it didn't
yeah.
come to
Anyway,
mind. Tell me. Tell me.
well, some years after he left, three. I don't know how long, 5, 8, some years afterwards. Anyway, he came back to Zen Center, and we had this big gathering of students, of just his closer students, not
At
the whole sangha.
Nicasio?
No, no, at the house next to Page Street, his old house next door to Page Street.
Right.
Anyway, so he came and we had this meeting, and everybody fell in love with him again, and Dan
I
Welsh
remember.
forgave him, and um, um, and the group of us, Dan and I and a few others, I don't know who else was there. I don't remember now exactly who else was there. Went out with him to Cesar's next to Chez Panisse in Berkeley,
Mm-hmm.
because there was the chef there, David Tanis, was an old friend of mine, an old friend of Dan's, and so he sort of took care of us. So we went there and we drank, and David set out all this incredible food, and I started telling Dick about the Larry Ellison job, and he said, "Well, that sounds fabulous. I really want to see it." I said, "Dick," he said, "he's just like you, Dick. If I hadn't studied with you all those years, I could never have dealt with Larry Ellison. I mean, that deep bows. I'm very deeply grateful to you for your teaching, because I never could have, I never could have, I never could have, I never could have done it without having studied with you, because you're just you have they're so similar."
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Well, I really want to see it." So he came down with Mary Louise, whatever, his wife,
Right,
the
right.
princess,
Louise.
and they came down to visit. And it was probably before your time. The pond was still being dug. There was still a lot of rough work around, but I had a model of the whole thing there, and
Oh, yeah.
and he's anyway, he saw it all, and he thought, "Wow, this is really fabulous and wonderful, it's amazing." I said, "Yeah, it's amazing." And I repeated again. I said, "Dick, it's just like you. I'm just so grateful for your teaching. I could never have done this without you. It's just like you." And he said, and Dick says, "Yeah, but people say he's an asshole." I said, "Yeah, Dick, just like you. People say you're an asshole, but is it true? For some people it is. For some people it isn't." The princess thought it was hysterical. She was on the ground laughing at that point.
That's good. That's good.
But they both have special powers. Ellison's is that he can see the future, the business future, and Dick's is that he can see people. He can see who people are. See who he can see people. Their psychic body, and they have no remorse. I mean, they're basically sociopaths. So they come off very similar, but Ellison, you could pose a question to him about, we could buy this now and put it aside, and then we'd be ready to do this then, and then yada yada, some scheme for the future, and he would stop, and you could tell that he was going there. He was going there in time, going through the scenario, and then coming back and saying, "Oh, that's a good idea." He said, "Oh no, that won't work." And he's not saying like, "I think it's," I don't. He's not saying it like, "No, I don't like that idea. It's a bad idea." He's saying, "No, I saw what would happen, and it won't work." He's reporting on it like he was there.
Yeah.
And that's why he's a multi-billionaire.
Yeah. You know what that reminds me of? I've read about uh, people who design machines and can design them in their mind and then run them and see what the
Yeah,
problems are.
that's I can do that with buildings.
Huh. Huh.
I can build a whole building and see whether, oops, that doesn't fit there. I'd have to go back and do it again, and come up with a solution. I do that all the time.
Uh. Uh.
I before I started building something, I've already built it at least a dozen times. I worked out the mistakes.
Wow. Wow. Well, could you describe the components of the Ellison home? Because there was, I mean, like the bridge. There was this bridge where you come in. I mean, this wonderful road where you come in that has, you're going over this stonework on the road, right?
Yeah, there was two bridges, one at the top and one at the bottom, and the idea was that you took the long way around the pond. You went down, and then crossed the southern bridge, and then came back and entered the building from the south. Of course, nobody does that. They take the shortcut, take the stone bridge, and go to the back door.
Yeah. The stone bridge. Um, tell about how that was put together. I remember. I mean,
Well, it was. I wanted to have a body. I wanted the idea of crossing a body of water before you got there. That's part of the ancient organization of a classical Chinese Japanese building, crossing the water before you enter, and so I designed this pond with two long arms on either end that you had to put a bridge across. There was no need for the bridge except that I made a need for it by building the pond underneath it.
mm-hmm.
And one of them had to be highway is strong enough to take any vehicle that could run on the highway, like fully loaded fire truck, or it had to be massively strong.
Yeah.
And the other one could have could be limited. So I did a wood bridge, an 80-foot wood bridge at one end, and a 60-foot stone bridge at the other end. And the stone bridge was the one that was 20 feet wide and could take the and what I did was I used the computer to make the basic form outside the curves, and then by hand I drew in all the stones that made the facade of it, and I made them. I tried to make them all similar but dissimilar, so they were not they were not repetitive, but they were not dissimilar either, so they fit together as far as size and shape and location and everything. And it took me a long time to do that. It was really nerve-wracking to do it, and I did it at an inch to the foot scale by hand. and then we scanned that into the computer, and then the computer doesn't read hand drawing so clearly, so I came back and fixed all the areas that the computer sort of got it strange. And then we put numbers on each one of them and blew them up full scale.
Oh,
so each
my
stone was on a separate sheet of paper, full scale.
Yeah.
And then we sent that to China, and
mm-hmm.
they used those paper patterns to cut out all the stones and number them all. And then they sent them back. I went over there a couple of times to help them do it, and then they sent them back, and I built this wooden frame, the arch, and we'd put flatter stones down on that, and then we built then they built these walls. That the masons, somebody just took the Chinese stones and built the stone wall on either side, with no mortar, just dry fit together. And then we had to put little attachments drilled into the back of them. Anyway, but they were just dry fit, and I had a hard time. There were some Ukrainian masons that they hired, and they wanted to make it perfect. They kept trying to run their little diamond saws in the cracks and make them. I wanted to be a little bit crude, but I had a hard time getting him to do it. Anyway, so it's all dry fit stone bridge, just like old days. And then we put 90 tons of steel and God knows how many yards of concrete in it, and turned it into this massive structure. But it was strong enough to take any kind of load. But from the outside, it looks like an old-fashioned gravity stone bridge.
Wow. And the other bridge had a tea house on it, right?
No, there was. You ever go to Katsura Rikyu when you were in Japan? The Summer Palace.
No, is it near Daitokuji or?
It's west. It's west of Daitokuji, but it's Arashiyama over that side of the city. Anyway.
Go on.
You'd know if you went there, but anyway.
I don't think I have, but I'd love to get back.
There's a building there called Shokinte. That's a tea house, but it's a tea house for the full ceremony where there's where they have food and everything, and and it's just an exquisite building. It was built in the 1500s by an aristocrat, priest, a young fellow actually, and who was studying Western architecture from Portuguese books that were just coming in at the time. Anyway, there's a lot of European influence in very curious ways. But anyway, and anyway, it's just this incredibly sophisticated piece of architecture. It's like a whole village compressed into one building. There's a thatched roof part, and a tile roof part, and a shingle roof part, and it's got an interior courtyard, and it's got this fireplace. Anyway, it's just a totally amazing piece. It's like something that Mozart would have written. It's just this incredible piece of architectural music. Anyway, so he said he wanted two guest houses. One I could choose, and they could be like super Japanese, and the other one he wanted more westernized so that Westerners feel a bit more comfortable there. And so I chose the Shokinte, and I did a copy of it. And that's right by the bridge, but it's not part of the bridge.
Mm-hmm. Is it over the water?
It's next to the water. It's not over the water.
All right. So, what structures were? How big was the land area for the Ellison estate?
The original was 24 plus acres. Then he bought 15 more next door.
And what structures were on it? So far, we've got two bridges in the tea house.
After I got through, or before I started, there was a Julia Morgan on it when I started. It took 3 years to get permission to tear down.
You tore down a Julia Morgan?
Yep.
Oh my God!
It was interesting. It took all that time and all these forensic architects and all this legal hassle and everything, and we finally made an agreement that we would keep everything that was original in the building, and find a place to rebuild it, to use it again, and so that was that. We had to keep everything that was original. Well, it had been remodeled twice, and there was the stuff that was original fit in one 20-foot container half full. there was almost no Julia left in it. It had been quite thoroughly remodeled twice.
Uh-huh. So what happened to that
Anyway,
that's in that container?
I don't know. They took it off to a vacant lot somewhere and forgot about it. They sort of swept it under the rug.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. All right.
And
That's an
and
interesting point. Yeah.
I tried 3 times to get him to keep it, use it for staff housing or something, and he'd sort of think about it and sort of say yes, then he'd come in. No, again, So after he said trash it 3 times, I said 3 times is the limit, and I gave up and we trashed it.
Hmm. All right. Um, well, all right. But what structures? So any
What
did
structures are there
what?
now?
Huh? What did was?
What structures are on there now?
Yeah.
There's a gatehouse, which is based on a country showing outside of Kyoto. It's anyway it's a very Muromachi style building with some round radiating rafters and some rectilinear rafters and anyway, it's 2 stories with like 2 stories, but not a real second story. But anyway, it's very much based on this a kind of country. It's sort of like a little barn, only it's like a little upscale barn. It's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like a pig's ear turned into a silk purse. It has the remnants. It has the aura of an outbuilding, of a country outbuilding with all the refinements of a tea house, but it also has the steel plate and bulletproof windows, and anyway, it's a little armored bunker as well. And that's the gatehouse where you come in. And then there's a gate. Then there's 50.
Well, what's the gate
Yeah,
like? What sort of
5.
gate?
No, it's just bamboo. It's half bamboo on a metal frame. Just a
Uh-huh.
bamboo fence. Um,
Well, let me ask you one
there
thing
is
about the bamboo. One thing I noticed,
yeah.
there's bamboo buildings here, and the I know a fella, yeah, John Steiner sent me to him, who built a bamboo hotel, the first all bamboo hotel in Asia or something, and he talked about how they had to develop a process so that the bamboo wouldn't decay, and uh,
Yeah, yeah.
termites wouldn't get to it, and this and that. So that was an important part of it. And I had some fellows build a bamboo fence here, and I have to have pieces of it replaced, you know, now and then because they just rot and fall off. But there's
Yeah, well,
enough.
that's the Buddhist approach.
Uh huh.
Everything changes,
Yeah. Well,
but
it's easy to
but
do that.
the Western approach is pump it full of poisons and try to keep it for a long time. It's also
Right.
hard to tie it together. It doesn't take fastenings well, so it's hard
Right.
to structurally fasten together structurally, but you can do it. There's people that make bamboo bicycles and stuff.
Bamboo
Anyway,
bicycles. Wow. Yeah,
yeah,
bamboo's
yeah.
amazing.
If you look on the internet, you'll see a whole line of bamboo stuff. But anyway, there's that, and I'm trying to think of how many. It's 50,000. No, that's over. It's more than an acre. That can't be right. But it's not 5,000. It's too small. Maybe it is 5,000. That's a 5 anyway. 50, 50, 50,000
Maybe at
would be more
15,000.
well, I don't remember that. Anyway, a shitload of stone pavers that I had made in China,
Uh huh.
1 foot, 1 foot by 2 feet, rectangular pavers on a roadway going in, and then you go over the stone bridge, and then you go straight ahead to the wooden bridge, and then you go around, then you go around, then you go after you go over the stone bridge. Just below the stone bridge, there's a guest house on the water. That's the Western style one that has like 2 suites, and there's some
Mm-hmm.
wooden floors, and I built a nose stage over the water so that he could have performances, but I don't think he ever did it. And then you come around to the back of the building, and there's a series of 3 garages, 3 big doors,
Yeah,
multiple doors,
I remember that.
and
You know what I
and
remember in the house is that you had a limit on. It was like the house couldn't be any bigger than 8,000 square feet or something.
that's right, yeah, yeah,
Uh, and but there was no limit on the basement or something like that.
right, yeah,
And
yeah,
you
that's
put a
true,
movie theater in the basement and all sorts of stuff.
yeah, yeah, yeah. There's the garage, and then on the way from the garage to the house, there's a security room with. At first, we are going to do a Kevlar room, a room with Kevlar, and the guy said, "Nah," he says, "Kevlar won't stop anything. You have to use 1/4 inch high tensile steel." So they built a room with steel lined room for the security guards for their headquarters, and yeah, there's a movie theater down there, and then underneath the other side, you sent me down to David Geffen. You know who he is, the Hollywood type.
Yeah.
Have you heard of him?
Oh,
He sent
yeah.
me down to his house. He sent me down to his house in L.A. to investigate his movie theater so I could build one like it.
Uh-huh.
And his movie theater in Malibu was on the water, and he had a concrete deck over the beach with a lawn growing on it. So he had a lawn with the breakers washing up underneath the lawn.
Huh. Huh. So
I
so
thought that was pretty LA. Anyway,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So the basement, the other basement underneath the other. There's 3 buildings. There's 3 different buildings. They all have basements under them, and the basements are all below water level of the pond. And what the big room, the big building is that has been turned into offices and is sort of administrative headquarters. And then the one underneath his bedroom is the movie theater, and the one underneath the kitchen is something else. I don't know. Anyway, I can't remember how you get down there. I can't remember. I can't remember that there has to be a staircase coming up. I can't remember where it is. Anyway, I don't show much of the inside of the house in the book. I just show the outside. But he gave me permission. I was the only one that got permission to photograph it.
Yeah, yeah. And now, my understanding is that he's bequeathed it to Stanford University.
He said that, but I don't. It's just like Dick. He says whatever comes to his mind at the moment.
Okay.
Or Donald Trump, for that matter.
But but it obviously will be, to me, I would think, is very likely to become a public space at some point.
Well, that was my hope, and that was the theory. You know, in the uh, Kinkakuji, the Golden Pavilion,
Yeah, yeah,
was built originally as a pleasure palace for a nobleman,
yeah.
and then in his old age he got religion and became a Buddhist, and then he gave it to Buddhism and he died. So it started out to be a pleasure palace, and then became a Buddhist building.
Right,
So
right.
I was sort of hoping for the same
Yeah.
progression. And basically what I built was half a temple. I built you know the right half of a temple
Uh,
of AAG.
yeah. Well, uh, you know, uh, one thing I remember about being in joinery structures, what you had this massive amount of wood from the urban forest that you had collected there, and you'd milled up in various stages. Um, so, how much of that did you use?
For Ellison,
No, well, no,
I
just
didn't.
whatever.
For Ellison, I didn't use that much. I cut a bunch of it, and he didn't like it. It had too much character. He says his
Uh-huh.
buildings. His story was the buildings are so fabulous, the design is so fabulous that the wood should be simple. You know, it should just be simple. It shouldn't take away from the design of the buildings. That was his story. And
Well,
anyways, and I'd cut all this elm for the decking for around the building and everything, and he rejected it all. I some beautiful big slabs of elm, and and he bought this virgin forest, old growth virgin yellow cedar planks, 18-inch wide planks, 4 inches thick. There was 500 years just in one 18-inch wide plank of rings. It was that old. Anyway, he bought that from Canada and used it instead. And then I took all of that wood. I took all the wood that he rejected and used it to build a Felsentor in Switzerland.
oh yeah, I've been there. That's beautiful. That's
So
beautiful.
that deck around the second story of the Zendo,
Yeah.
the outside deck, that's elm I cut for Ellison's deck that he rejected.
Oh wow, wow, that's a beautiful. Wow, that is some beautiful building. Uh, yeah. I talked to the German contractor for that, and um, I had a phone chat with Vanya, uh, I don't know, a month ago or something, and I told Vanya that I always study language when I'm in a place, and German's very hard, and I was only there
Yeah,
for
I
months.
never made much headway with German.
Oh,
I mean, I
German's
was
hard,
there
man.
for years. Yeah, German's really hard.
Yeah, uh, but I knew enough to. He didn't speak any English, and he was up there, and I was sitting waiting for the cog cog train. I mean, what do you call that thing?
Yeah, they have
The, the
the Rigi Bond.
right, right,
Like
and
the Rigi Bond's like the name of it, but it's a cog railroad. Yeah.
yeah, and he told me that it took 500 helicopter trips to bring all the materials up. And I asked Vanya if that was true, and he said, "Yeah, maybe so."
I
uh,
think that's an exaggeration, but it took a lot.
yeah, it would have to be. That's ridiculous.
Yeah,
Uh,
it had to be 100. Only 100 kilos was as much as the helicopter could bring.
mm-hmm.
So we had to reorganize everything in 100-kilo bundles.
Yeah. Uh, hey, would you give me a second? Somebody's at the door. I have to go to the gate for just a second.
Okay,
All right. Yeah. Glad I went to the gate.
good.
Uh, yeah, that was
The-
some English breakfast tea. There's some English breakfast tea that comes out of Jakarta, out of Java, that is so good. And the
Huh.
store just keeps not having it. So I just went online and ordered it from the company yesterday, late afternoon. They just delivered it. And it was cheaper than buying it in the store.
Showed up already. Wow. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, they're wonderful people. They're great. And you love our carpenters. Um, it's not at the level of Japanese carpentry at all.
Yeah. Like I got involved in a lot of that Thai, Balinese architecture actually, because Larry wanted me to build a Balinese villa for him down in Malibu, and I'd spent a lot of time studying and studying the
Wow.
books mostly. I read and then I got involved with the Doris Duke Foundation. Had all these buildings that Doris Duke had commissioned from Thailand, which is similar kind of construction, and she brought
Yeah.
them back, all these teak buildings she brought back from Thailand, and she was going to build them in that park she had on Diamond Head in Honolulu, but it never happened. So then it went back to New Jersey, and then when they were redoing her what is your compound there, whatever you call it, or estate. They were trying to get rid of it, so they gave a bunch of it to the San Francisco Botanical Garden, where I had friends. And so I went back and harvested a bunch of it and brought it back to use for the Botanical Garden, but then they could never make up their mind what to build. So I designed a bunch of stuff for that too that never got built, and they're still sitting there, I think. Anyway, so I spent quite a bit of time with that kind of carpentry and that kind of architecture.
Well, the Balinese is only one aspect of it. There's a very interesting different types of architecture and buildings from other islands. And our carpenter is not from Bali. He's from Java, and I don't know how much. I mean, but the stuff he's done for us here isn't there isn't anything ancient or traditional. But he'll sit out there with hand tools on the pavement with stones outside and build a really beautiful cabinet or something. I just sometimes I thought Paul would love this guy. And he's such a sweet guy, and his son he's stuck in Java now. They're not letting people in. They haven't been for a while, even from other islands. But his son came over and did some things for me recently, and they like working. If they run out of things to do, he'll come to me and say, "Come on, give me something else." And they're not working by the hour. They get the same amount whenever they quit. And he's getting a fixed amount.
Yeah, no, that's the way most people are in the world. They work is what they like to do, is what they do. It's just
right. He'll clean the house. He'll clean the house. I was telling him our house cleaner, she's away for a ceremony for a few days. He said, "Well, let my son and me come over and clean your house tomorrow." And they did.
Yeah.
And as soon as they arrive, the first thing they'll do, if I haven't swept the courtyard, they'll sweep the courtyard.
No, it's the Industrial Revolution. Turned the workers and the employers into enemies, and work became a dirty word.
Oh yeah. Well, what happens is, modernization and money and all that comes in, and they put a bunch of money and wealth into the island and make people poor. But nobody wants to go back.
And it's hard to go back. Yep. Yep.
And I remember you did this beautiful, I don't know what you call it, a home altar for this Chinese family that I saw.
That was a long time ago. That Babinga altar for the Chinese family out in Walnut Creek. That was a long time ago. I was still at Zen Center in those days.
We went over pretty well, what you've been doing since you got back from Japan. But I wanted to hear about your experience in Japan. All right, I have this one image. It's really cool. Is you went over there and you got a connection to this really fine temple carpentry firm, and the first thing that they put you on was filling in knot holes. Is that right?
Well, that's no, there's everything you said is true. It's just the sequence is different.
Yeah. How'd you get there? What was the connection?
Well, did you want the whole story? Chronologically?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was I'd sold everything in my life. I'd sold my house, my car, my truck, and all my household possessions, everything.
Wow.
And I had a motorcycle and a girlfriend and some camping gear, and I had some tools I left at my parents' house. And I was on my way to Japan, but I didn't know any Japanese language. I didn't know any Japanese people. I'd never been out of the country before. I was 23 years old, Uh, it was a little scary, but I didn't want to admit that. And I heard about this. I heard about this job up in the Sierras, where a place that my girlfriend at the time, called Ruthie, you know Ruthie,
Yeah.
Had camped before, and they were working. There was work up there, and I thought I'd work on this project, a dam project or something, for a while to make more money before I was sort of stalling. But I'd also been down to Tassajara the year before with Michael Wilde and Natasha and a girlfriend at the time named Michael and another couple of 6 of us had camped out at Grasshopper Flats and taken acid and run up and down the creek naked and we met Jim Cook. Remember Jim Cook?
Oh
by any
yeah.
chance?
Oh yeah.
He was the caretaker there then, year before Zen Center. But the Zen Center wasn't in the picture at this time.
Right.
Anyway, Jim was there, but that was the only person there. It was Easter break, school break. Anyway, and so that was my week in Tassajara. So I had that, and then Barton Stone, who Bird Brother, you may know as.
Oh yeah.
And my cousin Carla Serndorf were both Zen Center people at that time. And Martin and I were working together, building houses together, and I was involved in radical politics, and the free speech movement and that kind of stuff, the Boys Club and various things. And he was going to Zen Center, and anyway, so I heard that Zen Center had bought Tassajara. So I thought I'd go down and check it out. So Ruthie and I went down on a motorcycle, and Norton 650. Anyway, and planned to spend 4 days. And ended up spending 4 years. Met Philip Wilson first, and then Rob Gove took us under his wing. And anyway, then Suzuki's talked me out of going to Japan, basically. And he asked me how could I serve humanity better, by being a carpenter or a priest? And since I was sort of attached to both of them by that time, it was a struggle. But finally I said priest, and he said. He didn't say anything more about it. And then he told me to go see Oaksan. He didn't say why, and she measured me, but for something, but she didn't say what. But it turned out to be robes. And then he ordained Reb and I. And then about a month or two after the ordination, he announced at a public meeting, without talking to me, he said, "You may think I'm crazy, but I'm sending Paul to Japan for a year." And so that's the first I'd heard of it.
Wow.
So a couple of months later, Benjamin had been born by that time, and Ruthie and Benjamin and I got on a freighter, and went from San Francisco to Osaka, not Osaka, to
Kobe,
Yokohama.
Oh.
And spent a couple of days there. Went down and saw D.T. Suzuki's grave in Kamakura from somebody, a Japanese person I'd met at Tassajara, and went to some Kamakura's places, some incredible buildings in Kamakura.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then we got back on the boat and went down to Kobe.
Oh.
And disembarked there, and Dick and Jenny and Sally met us at the boat, and we'd brought them crates of oranges that they said they couldn't get in Japan.
Oh.
And I had all my stuff. I had my Western tools, and anyway, and then I went to live at their house at Gentaku-sha. You remember that house, right? You remember that? Maybe you weren't there. That house was gone.
I think that was gone by the time I got there. I stayed. I stayed 1 or 2 nights in the house where Nakamura Sensei went after that. I think that was near Myoshinji.
Yeah, Shinji House. Yeah. Anyway, so this is Gary Schneider's old house where he found Nakamura and Bonner there,
Yeah.
and it had these rather, what would you call it? Rather, I don't know. They were lewd, I guess, paintings on the fusuma that some of his drunk friends had done. Snyder's drunk friends had done, and and I lived there for about 3 months or so with the Bakers.
Wow.
And then I found a place out in the country, out in a place called Ohara No, on the southwest side of town, up in the bamboo forest there, and fixed it up. And the first job I had, and I started going to language school, Japanese language school, and then the neighbors next door were building a little 2-story barn, housing unit behind their house, and so I'd go over and sit there and watch that, and didn't have much Japanese at that time, but I would watch and see what they were doing, and then Dick took me to Muman Yamada's, and he came once a month from Kobe for his training temple in Kobe to Mushinji and lectured, and he that's the time that he was burning the bones from the war. You know about that story?
No, I do not.
He would go down to the South Pacific, all the islands in the South, and collect all the bones in the caves and wherever, all the war dead bones, and make these big piles of them, like gigantic big piles of them. I mean, 50 feet in diameter piles of skulls, and pour diesel or something over them and set them on fire and burn them. And he said, no bones, no death. So he was trying to erase the karma from the war. And he was doing, and so he was doing fundraising for that, and so he had an assistant that was his assistant in this project, a man named Sano-san, who had a temple in Kyoto named Daruma-dera. Everything was Bodhidharmas in it. And he had an assistant named Suzuki, and so I went with Dick to see Buman, and that was an interesting event. And then afterwards, after the lecture, you paid some money. You could go in and have tea with him afterwards, and there was a number of people came in to have tea with him, and we were one of them. And Dick asked him, or I asked him, if he, who I was and what I was doing, and I was looking for temple building work. And Muman said no, he didn't know anything. But Sano-san spoke up and said, "Oh yes, I know. I'm rebuilding my temple, and I'm rebuilding it with the best temple builder in all of Japan, and yada yada." And I'll set you up and all that. But first, you must do service. And he used the English word service, meaning volunteer work.
Oh yeah.
So, and then I met Suzuki at that time too. Anyway, so the volunteer work was me driving them, chauffeuring them back and forth from Kyoto to Kobe.
Now, wait a minute. The Suzuki you met was, remind me.
A young fellow. He was a Maoist. He was
wow.
Zengaku-rin,
oh, yeah.
The student movement.
Yeah.
He was a graduate student of demonology.
Oh, my God.
His father was a samurai class flower arranging teacher, but he would only teach men. He didn't teach women.
And what was his role?
In Tokyo.
Yeah, what was
His role? Was Sano-san's assistant.
Oh, right, right.
For the bone burning. Anyway, he spoke English and German and French and knew a lot more about European philosophers than I did at the time. And he was supposed to teach me Japanese. He was supposed to be my Japanese teacher, but we'd sit up all night drinking sake and talking English. But anyway, that's a different story. But anyway, so
mm-hmm.
I would. He wanted me to drive to Kobe. He wanted me to take. I guess I think I only did it once, maybe. I don't know. It was horrendous anyway. Drive from Kyoto to Kobe at night in the evening on the wrong side of the road in a car I didn't know, and they sat in the back and talked and told me what to do. And then we got there, and then there was this press conference where they talked about. The TV was there, so they talked about the bone burning, and he was doing calligraphy and selling them, and he had a lot of money for his calligraphy. He was a famous for his calligraphy, and then all the press went away. Then they brought out the food, and Muman had this young woman that was sat by his side and fed him and took care of him. It was sort of like an appendage almost. Anyway,
was that Priscilla?
What?
Was that Priscilla?
A young Japanese woman.
Oh, all right.
Anyway, they brought out the food and they brought out the sake, and then the old ritual of, the foreigner has to have a drink with everybody. So I had to exchange drinks with a dozen or more people, and of course I was totally soused by the end of the night. And it was a common occurrence. I'm sure you were stuck in it too.
Oh yeah.
And then I had to drive home. And Sano-san, Muman stayed there, but Sano-san was in the back of the car, and he wanted me to drive home, drunk as I was. I was really drunk. And he said, "That's okay. Just count from 100 to 1 backwards in Japanese." And I did. And the concentration of counting, and somehow we got home. Anyway, it was kind of a magical moment.
Yeah.
So then I went a little while later. I went down to Fushimi Inari, down to Fushimi, the town of Fushimi, to meet this famous carpenter that was going to build his new temple. And it was a big complex, and there was this housing unit there for apprentices. There's a house there and a shop, but there was nobody around. And I went and I knocked or called out at the door, and I could hear people inside, but nobody came to the door. And so I finally went away, and then I found out a few days later he'd died the night before.
Mm.
The carpenter had. So that was the end of that project. And then somehow, I guess Sano-san had a friend that taught at the university, the Bushinji University. Oh, I can't remember the name of it now, but anyway, there's a Buddhist university associated with Bushinji, and he taught there, and he was the young priest at a sub-temple of Bushinji, and they were halfway through building a little showroom, a little guest house on the temple grounds, right, just to the right of the Buddha Hall in Bushinji complex, off one of those compounds, separate compounds. Anyway, so I went and started working there, and the old priest was into publicity, so he kept calling the TV in to have this round-eyed, blue-eyed carpenter was something for publicity. So he used me for publicity, and I worked there just with the carpenter and the plasterer, just the three of us, finishing this building. And it was a good learning. It was a very good learning experience. I mean, he made me. I mean, there's no power tools. We had to do everything by hand, and and the carpenter was kind of a cranky guy, not very even tempered. He's a pinky no show, they called him. Like changes like the weather.
Uh-huh.
And but the shakanya, the plasterer, was super mellow. He lived there because they were both the carpenter and the shakan were from Gifu. Because the abbot of Mushinji was from Gifu at that time, and so they brought him down to do this job. Anyway, he played the shakuhachi at night, and he was just super mellow, and another guy was just cranky and ornery. And I remember at lunch we were sitting out there having our lunch, and he would take a little piece of fish from his lunch and put it on a branch, on a bush nearby. And when the yellow jackets would come to eat the fish, he would take a piece of silk thread and tie it around the yellow jacket's leg, and then fluff up the end so it made a little tassel, like a little pom-pom, and then watch the yellow jacket fly away, and he would follow it until it came to a wall or somewhere where he couldn't get there. And then he would do it again, and then he'd run around and wait for it to fly over the wall, and then he'd follow it to the next wall or next barricade until finally he found where his nest was. And then he went, and he had a bamboo tube full of cellulose plastic, and he'd lit that, and it made a big smoke cloud. He'd smoked the yellow jackets and dug them out of the ground. They nest in the ground. And they make comb, but they were just for brood, not for, there's no honey or anything. And he brought this brood home, and brood to work the next day, very, very proud. And it was this comb looks just like honeycomb, only it's got little bees inside of it. And he had a pair of tweezers, and he would pluck the nymphs, the brood out, and we were supposed to eat it. So the first one I ate, I put it in my mouth and I chewed it, and it was crunch. It was awful crunchy sound. Second one I swallowed it. It was alive, and it wriggled down my throat, and that was awful. Then after that I threw it over my shoulder, pretending to eat it.
Oh.
Anyway, that was that. And then when we finished that job, he wanted me to go back to Gifu with him, but I'd only been in Japan for 6 months or something at that time, and he was difficult, and Ruthie was in the tea school, I think, by that time.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so we didn't go, and then I said for 3 months I sat in the office of a control engineer when they rebuild a. You really want this detail? Anyway,
Yes.
Anyway, when they rebuild a national treasure building or a national asset building, they have a team. They have usually a team of engineer and an assistant, and they document everything about the building. They take it apart, photograph it coming apart, and they photograph all the secret writing inside that's hidden. They dig down into archaeology underneath the building and see all the buried stuff underneath it, and do a historical research on what it looked like originally. Anyway, they do a major treatise on it. It's usually a book, maybe 150, 200 pages long. And they do very careful line drawings of it, exact drawings of it, and then they take it all apart and then replace the broken rotten parts, put it all back together again like it was, or like it was originally, more than like it was when they found it, and then they publish a book about it. But the book's not for sale on the market. The book is just an internal government document, and so. This engineer that I was studying with, he had his collection that he had over that he got, because every time they do a building, they publish it and they give it to all the engineers. Anyway, so I was studying his books, and I couldn't read Japanese. I couldn't read very much. Anyway, but I could tell the different styles, and anyway, so I did them by styles and period, and then I excerpt some of the ones I thought the most interesting, and they didn't have Xerox then, but they had photocopy, so I would photocopy some of the drawings of the ones I thought were the most typical of the style. Anyway, so I spent like 3 months doing that all day long, and then
Wow.
and then and then one of his friends died. One of the engineer's friends died, and his widow sold me his collection of books. So I have a collection of over 200 National Treasure temple books, which are detailed enough to reproduce the exact building.
Oh my God.
Anyway, and which I use for details and for and for inspiration. Anyway, and then about that time, and then I was there as Huitsu was my
Sponsor.
sponsor, but Huitsu is of course in Shizuoka, so the visa people didn't like that, so Dick took me to Kabori. You ever meet Kabori? Henri
No,
Kabori.
I didn't. He was before my time.
Tokuchi, maybe he was dead.
Yeah.
Maybe, anyway, I don't know. Anyway,
Heard a lot about
he
him.
was. You know Ruth Fuller Sasaki, right? The woman that.
Well, I know of her. Sure, of course.
Yeah, I mean, you know who she is.
Yeah.
And she married a Japanese priest, right?
Yeah, she married
Tokuchi.
Shinzaki, who founded the Zen Institute in New York City.
Yeah, maybe
I might
so.
have
But
his
anyway.
name wrong. I think it's
Anyway,
Shinzaki. Ruth Fuller Sasaki. Ruth Fuller Sasaki.
Ruth Sasaki, yeah. Ruth Fuller Sasaki, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, they still had a temple there at Daitoguchi, but it wasn't open, and Kabori had taken over the face to the outside world from him.
Yeah.
He had died and she had gone off. Maybe they both died. I don't know. I never met him.
He died in New York. He was in New York.
Oh, maybe.
And then
maybe
she
so.
came and got that thing going. And that's where Gary Snyder went.
Look at a book, Zen Dust or something.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's an incredible book she did with him.
Yeah. Anyway, my point being that they made Kabori take over the interface with foreigners. Because he spoke English. He spoke very good book English, but it wasn't conventional. It wasn't conversational English. It was book English. But he hated foreigners. super nationalist. But he as a good Japanese, he did his duty.
You're talking about Kabori hated foreigners?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great detail, man. Because I've heard a lot about him. That's great.
He was a hard ass. I mean, he was not fond of foreigners. He was not. It wasn't like Suzuki where she liked foreigners.
Yeah.
You thought we were interesting. Kabori thought we were a bunch of unwashed heathens that have limited intellectual capacity. He hated Gary Snyder. He lit into Gary Snyder and just tore him a new asshole.
Wow. Well, Gary Snyder, his teacher was the guy before what's his name, Oda?
I don't know. I was before my time. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Maybe Kabori's teacher was Oda. Oda or I think Oda.
I don't know. I really don't. I never heard anything about that. I never even knew that Gary had a teacher.
Oh yeah.
Because he didn't. He was not a joiner. He was a non-joiner.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
I guess he still is a non-joiner. Anyway, he is alive, isn't he?
Yeah. Yeah.
I haven't heard different. Anyway.
Yeah, I got an email from him. 2 months ago or something.
Okay, great. So Dick took me to Kabori, and we asked Kabori to be my sponsor, but she sort of reluctantly did, and so that he became my sponsor, and then I started sitting zazen with him. On 2 nights a week, he had zazen for outsiders there at his temple.
Mm-hmm.
And I started sitting with him, and then at some point he introduced me to Kimura. Kimura had rebuilt his temple. I think he rebuilt the what's it called? Anyway, there's a famous tea house showing Founders Hall, one of his buildings.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the name of it now, but anyway, and he'd rebuilt that some years before, and so Kimura knew him, and I guess I'd come to Zazen often enough, so he felt some confidence in me, so he introduced us. And Kimura was a very outgoing, very cheerful guy, and he had built the Kinkakuji, the Golden Pavilion, after it was burned. Mishima wrote the book.
Wow.
Yeah, it's because he had married the number one carpenter in Japan's daughter in the 50s, and so he got to go to the top of the list because he was married to the daughter of the number one carpenter. And so he built that, and he became good friends with the priest there. And we would go and visit sometimes. And he knew where the key was. We could go into the Golden Pavilion and go inside and go upstairs and stuff. I took that Englishman, what's his name?
Graham Petchy?
Died recently. Graham. I took Graham there one time, yeah.
Oh.
Anyway, that's a whole other story. But anyway, so I started working for Kimura, who had built a mausoleum, a Golden Pavilion knockoff mausoleum in Hawaii. So he had some experience with overseas. He was, most craftspeople, they've never even left the province, let alone overseas.
Yeah.
I mean, they're
very insular, and they consider people from the next kin over to be foreigners. Anyway, so I went to work for his company, and I don't remember how we started, but we built. He was in the process of building a temple in Matsugasaki Cho, up there in the northeast corner on the road to Ohara. The other Ohara, not Ohara, no, but the other Ohara. You know where that is?
No.
You might even know. You probably never went there, no. Anyway,
I might have been there and forgotten it.
It was up on a hill, up on the hill raised up just above the plain, the Kyoto plain, and it was a Nichiren. So it was a Nichiren neighborhood. All the temples up there were Nichiren, and but it was also a Taoist. It was called Daikoku-ten, the big black one. Anyway, the big black heaven. Anyway, it was to the immortals. It was one of the immortals, and it also had a Shinto shrine on it. And his main thing that he did was he didn't have a graveyard and do funerals like most temples. He would purify things. You would come with your new car or your new baby or your new saxophone or your new whatever, and he would chant that. I think as I recall, it was the 11th verse of the Lotus Sutra over it. At breakneck speed. Like that. And that's how he made his money.
Well, he must have been popular, because that sounds like more of a Shinto role, and the Buddhists, they always associate with death, so he must have been a popular guy doing something positive like that.
Yeah, I don't know. It was Nichiren, and it was very insular and very, it was sort of like it was, like people that came over on the Mayflower that just they only talk to certain people. Anyway, anyway, so I worked on that project for almost a year, and there was the foreman. There was this man named Mukegawa, and he was an old timer, and he was a real pro. He was the real deal. He really knew his stuff. I mean, he'd trained since early age to be a woodworker, and he'd pushed the envelope as far as he could. He'd really worked on it. And he came from a town on the west side of Lake Biwa. At that time, there was no train there, but anyway, over near, not so far from where Peter and Jane ended up living.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
I've been there. Uji,
anyway,
no.
so he sort of took.
No,
I don't know. I was only there once. I went there for a Matsuri, his village Matsuri, which was a whole other event.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he sort of took me on, and the carpenter Mushinji had taken me out, and he'd wanted me a plane and a sharpening stone and a couple of other tools. This was back when there was 360 yen to the dollar, so things were cheap.
Yeah.
And Dick had insisted that you couldn't live in Japan for less than 16 mon a month because he was a big spendthrift.
That's
so he made
right.
Center.
Yeah.
Sent him 16 mon a month, and then he insisted they send me that much because otherwise it would look like he was being extravagant. But I could live quite easily on 2 mon a month, so I saved the rest of it. Anyway, he went there and he went to Eheiji for like 3 weeks, right? And then he couldn't stand it, and he busted out, and Jenny had to come and get him, and the car window broke, and they were in the rainstorm. It was a horrendous story. Anyway, and he came back to Kyoto, and then he just entertained people. He was just the ambassador. And anybody of interest that came to Kyoto, he would take them around. He'd take them out to restaurants and order one of everything in a restaurant, and take them to temples and be the Mr. Gladhand. Anyway, and then he'd have a string of women that would come through. Renee started there while I was there.
Is that right? I didn't know that. Wow.
But he had other women before that. And Jenny would say, "Why can't? Oh, I feel this about him." She was she'd put up with it, but she'd complain a little bit. Anyway. So everybody I met from Eheiji that was there but knew Dick there and hated him, or they had negative things to say about him, I should say. And everybody that knew Philip Wilson was there and loved him. They loved Philip. Everybody loved Philip.
And Philip and Jean, they liked a lot because
I never heard about Jean. But was Jean was at Sojiji, wasn't she? Or was she at Eheiji?
She was at Eheiji. She might have been at Sojiji too, but I associate her with Eheiji.
I don't know. I don't have much connection there. I don't know.
Yeah, she sat in the Zendo at Eheiji.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah, she got ordained as a priest, and I can't believe it, but that's what it says. It's the information I have.
Yeah,
it's hard to believe.
I don't have any first-hand information. I only knew her briefly, and anyway, thoroughly likable person, great glider.
Yeah.
She was a wonderful spirit. But anyway, I don't know anything about her or any details. Anyway, but Philip, I remember the story about Philip doing Tongario. You may have heard this story too, where he would sit in Tongario and he'd sit there and then they'd leave the room and he'd plop over and go to sleep. They'd come in the room and yell at him and beat him with a stick, and he'd pop up, sit right up straight, and they'd leave the room and he'd fall over and go to sleep.
That's good.
You couldn't really hurt Philip. Suzuki Roshi tried one time. That's another story. Did I ever tell you that story about Suzuki Roshi? I'll break rank here. I was in that cabin up there, the old caretaker's cabin up on the upper garden,
Sure, I lived in it too.
Above Suzuki Roshi's cabin, which is down below, just below.
Yeah.
And so one time, I heard Philip say, "Yes, teacher, yes, teacher," and whack, 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 and "Yes, teacher, yes, teacher," and Suzuki was beating the shit out of Philip with a stick, and I forget all the details of how it happened, but some months later, there was a visiting Rinzai teachers. I don't remember which ones now, but some of the big names in Rinzai.
So in Nakagawa. And,
something like that, probably.
Yeah, so in Nakagawa came with Yasutani and Edo from New York.
Yeah, that all sounds right. And he brought me this short teaching staff, not a Kiyosaku, but a short teaching staff,
right.
Like maybe a foot long or so, out of oak, broken in half. I said, he told me, "I want you to put this back together, but don't do it too well. I want them to see the broken part. I want them to think that we have tough practice in this country too." And he gave that as a present to Soen or whoever.
Oh yeah, cool.
Anyway, but you couldn't hurt Philip. He was.
Boy. I can tell you. I don't want to do it now. I can tell you stories he told me were serious stuff that would have killed me. Didn't hurt him. He had dudes. Yeah. He had dudes, and he had an apartment building in Compton, and he was clearing dudes who were smoking a pot in front and harassing the people living there. He went and told them they couldn't do that. They had to be nice, and they said, "Who are you to tell us that? Yeah. Go to." And a dude ended up hitting him on the head with an iron bar, and he turned around and he said, "That just makes me stronger," and he scared them all away. But you know who Philip told me who scared him? Who beat him was Tatsugami at Eiheiji. They wrestled.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, Tatsugami may have had special chi powers that developed anyway.
Wow. Yeah.
He liked to wrestle with girls too. Anyway, and then there's the famous Philip story about his chainsaw and JJ in Virginia.
Chainsaw?
You've heard that one?
No.
Oh, anyway, the digression, Jim. Anyway,
but that's okay.
You knew JJ, right?
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so at some point he decided to be a tree trimmer, and he got this chainsaw, his new chainsaw. And he was really proud of it. He really loved it, and he insisted on sleeping with it in bed, him and JJ and the chainsaw. And she wanted to go back and see her fancy folks, and at the plantation house in Virginia. But she comes from a fancy family in Virginia, and so they went. But he insisted on taking his chainsaw. So he went there, and he went to the family, and he took his chainsaw to the family, and they stayed there for a few days, however long, I don't know. But then they were going to leave, and a storm was coming up. A winter storm was coming up, and the blizzard was coming, and so they rushed in a hurry to get to the train station before they got snowed in. And when they got to the train station, Philip realized he'd forgot his chainsaw. So he walked all the way back, the whatever many miles back to the house through the snow, and got his chainsaw and walked back to the station.
Wow.
Anyway, he was a beast of another order. But anyway, when I first arrived there, he put his arms around me and Ruth, he said, "You folks are wonderful, and I'd love to see you, but you can't stay." And he was the first person I met there.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know where I was. Anyway, so I was working. It was a Mukegawa, and they were of the school of don't tell you anything school. You have to steal it. You have to like see it for yourself. And I'd be sharpening away, and then come and say, "Oh, that's really difficult." I said, "Yes, it's very difficult." Yeah, wouldn't tell me what I was doing wrong. And then they gave me this big pile of floorboards to plane. It was Taiwan Hinoki floorboards, and it had kind of curly grain because it was like the butt of the tree, and it was just really difficult to plane. And I struggled for almost a month, for like 28 days or so. 28 days, not consecutive days, but most of a month.
Yeah.
And I tried. I was trying so hard that my stomach, my stomach got all upset. I got major stomach ache as you're pulling to your stomach all the time. Mm. And then I stayed home a couple of days. When I went back, all the boards were played. Somebody else had played it. And then Mukegawa told me what I was doing wrong. After I struggled for the whole month, he finally told me what I was doing wrong. Anyway, is that kind of thing.
Wow.
And then they got out all these old boards and had me playing them. And had me tie my hachimaki to my hand, tie my plane to the hand of my hachimaki, and
wait a minute,
playing all these boards.
The hachimaki?
The headband, the wrap around your head.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, so I planed all these boards, and then they were standing up on the side of the shop. There's a dirt road going into the shop, and they would come by and splash mud on them, and then they fell over, and trucks would run over them. Anyway, they just had him plane this big pile of wood for the experience. Anyway, so they were into teaching, but they were not into telling you what to do. They were letting you figure it out for yourself. And then I was working there. Mukegawa was the head guy, but there was a journeyman there that was sort of my partner that they partnered me with, named Kubo-san, who was Korean back 200 years back or something. But he was Korean, so he was underclass.
Oh right.
and even though he'd been there for generations.
Yeah.
And his family had been there. Anyway, so I worked with him, and he would tell me stuff if I asked, but nothing in too much detail. But he'd come up after the war as an apprentice after the war, where it was all handwork, and the apprentices had to pull all the wood to the job site on a two-wheel cart, like a beast of burden. And they had to rip all the wood up. They had to rip all the wood to size with a handsaw. And anyway, he was wonderful. I really was very close. I felt very close with him. But since I was a foreigner and he was an underclass, he would not allow himself to get too close. But anyway, he'd never invite me to his house or anything like that, or come to my house. Anyway, so I went off with. So they sent us off with Kubo-san, and we built fences for people and repaired this. We didn't have, after the temple was done, we didn't have any good work, and so then Kimura sent me out to the country, out to Lake Biwa, to a town out there near, I don't remember the name of the town, but the main town nearby was Yokkaichi. And it was a village, a small thatched roof village, hadn't changed in the last 150, 200 years, surrounded by rice fields. And it was all woodworkers of one kind or another. There was carvers, there was door and window makers, there was temple makers, there was house builders, there was a woodworking village, and the Kizawa Komaten was the temple builder in that complex, and he had a big shop on the highway just half a mile outside of the village. Anyway, so I went to work for him, but they were building a museum in Kyoto at first. So I went there, and I was obviously they're all country people, and I was obviously the first foreigner that ever met face to face, and they just pretended like I was a animal in the room or something, just or a lampshade or something for the first few days. Then they broke out the sake, and then we did the whole sake thing, and I got dead drunk and threw up, and they put me in the back of a car and drove me home, and they had no idea where my home was. And they would go by, and I would say, "Oh, Tabuna Soko des," claps again, and and they would ask, "Does the foreigner live around here? Does the foreigner live around here?" I was the only foreigner in the neighborhood. So anyway, they found me, deposited me. I don't remember it, but and the next morning I went to work, and the car had puked all over the back seat, and it was all clean, and they never mentioned a word. It was never ever mentioned. Anyway, so after we finished that museum job, then we went up to the country, and I tried commuting for a while, but it was too hard. It was like a 2-hour train ride or an hour and a half train ride.
Yeah.
Anyway, so then I moved into his house, lived at his house, and just came back Saturday night and left Monday morning.
Wait a minute, whose house? I've forgotten whose house.
Kizawa, the boss.
Oh yeah.
Kata.
Yeah. Oh wow.
So, and I lived in this little building in the front with an 80-year-old carpenter that also lived somewhere far away. Anyways, the two of us shared this room, this like 8-mat room in the front in an auxiliary building. No heat. Had a TV. The TV that you like to watch wrestling, pro wrestling. The old man did. I remember I used to sit there. I had one of those heating pads, like maybe 2 feet by 3 feet kind of heating pad, electric heating pad, and I would wrap that around my middle underneath my haramaki, and that's how I kept warm. But they gave us the hibachi with charcoal. The charcoal was cold in it, but that didn't do a damn thing, of course, because there was 2 feet of snow on the ground. Anyway, and then I ate with the family at the family table, and that was a whole adventure. That was a whole insight into Japanese life, because it was pretty traditional. Pretty traditional.
In what way?
Well, it's just the interaction between the family members and everything. Anyway, that's a whole other story. But it was an education. And then I'd hang out with Suzuki, who also taught me, Japanese stuff. Anyway, he was also a teacher of Japanese etiquette, culture, mindset. But he was drinking himself to death. His mother would secretly send him money, and he was just drinking. And I realized later he was gay, so that also is probably why he was a little bit, eccentric. And anyway, so I actually talked him into joining the Mushinji Soto. It was my first conversion to Buddhism in Japan. I was a convert. So I got him. I talked him into joining the Soto there, which he was in there for a long time because he was so difficult. Anyway, he was older than most of the others, and anyway, told some horrendous stories about that. That was also interesting. So I worked up there. We built a 3-story pagoda in by Lake Biwa, and took it down to Shodoshima down in the Inland Sea, and lived in a temple and then erected the pagoda. And we would work, as a Suichi Jugo Nichi kind of schedule. Where you took the 1st and the 15th of the days off. But since we were so far from home, we would just take 2 days off at the end of the month and work straight through the rest of the time.
Wow.
Anyway, no Saturday or Sunday for sure.
Wow.
Anyway, that was also, and I worked with these guys, these Chigatas, the strong men, the ones that they call them Tobi-san sometimes, those guys that wear the jumpers and the big haramakis, and they're not, you don't see them around anymore, but they were still there when I was there. That kind of half gangster. They're sort of like gangsters and enforcers. They're the brute force if you want something moved.
Well, they're not Yakuza?
No, they're not really Yakuza, but the Yakuza hires them if they want something done.
Huh.
But they have the tattoos and everything.
Uh-huh.
I don't know how Yakuza are or not they are, but anyway, they're part of the cultural fabric.
Uh-huh.
And so I hung out with them. That was interesting also. There's one guy in particular had a snake tattooed on his arm, and the head was on his left hand, and the tail was on his right hand, and it went around his back.
Wow.
Up his arm and across it around his back to the other side. And he could pick up about 300 pounds and then climb double steps. I climbed to the top of this hill where we're putting up the pagoda.
Whoa.
It was quite amazing. Anyway, so, and that's where I did the knotholes. So this building was.
There we go.
This building. Yeah, I got back to the knotholes. So this building was all made out of hinoki, but it was like lower grade hinoki, and it was not a hinoki, not clear hinoki. And Kizawa bought like maybe an acre of logs, the crooked logs. He bought all these crooked logs from all over, hinoki logs, and you would make these plywood templates of the pieces you wanted for the temple, for the pagoda or whatever. And then you go out in the yard, you'd find a log with that same curve, and then you'd put it on a truck, and then go to the sawmill, and they'd saw it up, and it would come back, and then you put the templates on the sawing slabs, and then saw them out on the bandsaw, and then use the jointer, and anyway, you would shape them either by machine or by hand to the rough shape, and then it would go to this fellow. What was his name? He was young. He was like 25 years old. He was the brains of the whole operation. Oh, I can't think of his name now. Anyway, he was the foreman, and he laid out the whole building. He drew every line on every piece of wood for the whole temple, for the whole pagoda. And then there was like 2 or 3 apprentices, and then several other older carpenters. We would cut it all out, stack it up, plane it, and then before it was planed, if there were any empty knotholes, I got the job for about 2 months of filling the empty knotholes by cutting out a plug of wood with a similar grain, of different sizes, putting it over the knothole, tracing around it, cutting out the wood, cutting out the knothole, driving the piece of wood in its place, and then cutting it off and smoothing it over so that it made a smooth surface to fill in the knothole. And I did it all with one pencil, and then when the pencil got too short, I made a joint on the pencil and added another piece of pencil onto it. Anyway, it was slightly fanatical kind of thing.
That's
I don't know how long I did that. I did that for quite a while, but I don't know. I don't really know how long. And there's lots of stories about that, about different kinds of teaching I received about in that environment. And then about that was about 4 years in, and I came back to San Francisco for some reason, and Ruthie stayed.
What year do you think it was?
That is 74 or 75. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't even know why I came back or anything about it. I know I helped build the Zendo at Page Street downstairs there.
Ah.
And I did a few other things.
You mean that Zendo wasn't built downstairs until 74 or 75?
That's my understanding. I mean, that's, yeah. The tons.
Is that right?
I think the floor was in already. There weren't any tons.
Oh, but not the tons. Right.
I put the tons together. I found the wood and put the tons together.
Oh, right. What'd you use?
A wood from Fort Funkston or something, some old army base they were tearing down.
Fort Ord. Oh, Fort Ord was made out of hinoki.
There's a lot of hinoki. That is just in some of the roofings. It wasn't everywhere, but yeah, there's definitely some. Yeah. Anyway, so that's
not
that's
hinoki. I mean, what is it?
Port Orford cedar.
Yeah.
Yeah, Behe. Yeah, it's the same thing, just different part of the world. Anyway.
Yeah.
So while I was gone, that's when Ruthie took up with Imai's son. So when I came back, she was living with Imai's son.
Oh. And you were already friends with Imai's son.
Oh yeah, he was hung out at our house all the time.
And had he already been doing things for Zen Center, or hadn't been?
No, he was working for a company that Len was working for. There was a company. I don't know. He was just an ordinary house builder. And when Len said when they talked Len into, when Len showed up before Dick went back, Len showed up from Reed. He just graduated from Reed. And then they said, well, what are you going to do? And so I think Virginia said, well, why don't you do what Paul's doing? So I said, oh, okay. But he had no experience in building, so he was a plasterer. They had him work for a plasterer for a couple of years, and then he started doing carpentry. And he worked for this company that my son worked for this contractor that somehow was associated with Gabori, I guess. I'm not sure where the connection was. There was some connection there. And then that's how I got to know him, through that connection. But at that time, he was a rocker. Long hair, velvet bell bottoms, played music. He was not a super dip. He was a mod from England. That was his persona. He was sort of anti-Japanese, actually. And he was taller. He was tall but a country boy. He was like a low class, but he was tall and looked good and stuff. And he always sort of resented being in his class position. And that's why he liked to hang out with foreigners, I think. Anyway, she got the hots for him big time. And
wait a minute, she got the hots? Who? I've lost track.
Ruthie.
Oh, are you talking about my son again?
My son, yeah.
I was still on Len Brackett.
No, Len Brackett was he was doing separate things elsewhere. I didn't see Len much then.
When did you start talking about my son?
My son worked at the same company as Len.
Yeah, and when you were talking about like to hang out with foreigners, were you talking about my son?
Yeah.
Oh, I was still on Len. Oh, okay.
No. Len was just the introduction to my son.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, so.
Oh, pardon me for laughing.
So anyway, that was somewhat tumultuous. And,
it wasn't the first time she'd done that to you.
No, it wasn't. and we tried living as a threesome for a bit, but that didn't work out either.
Well, that's very big-minded of you. Good Lord.
Yeah. Well, I'm sort of bent that way, but I never figured out how to make it work.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's neither here nor there, but it was too late now. Anyway,
I've had similar experience.
This pan, what do they call it now? Panamorous, whatever,
Oh, well, yeah.
It's so popular now. Anyway, Ben's into it. My son Ben's into it. Anyway, so that was a big thing, and then I left the country and came back to Kyoto when all that was going on, because I was away. I was away 6 days a week. Not surprising that she took up with somebody else, but anyway. But then I came back, and I was kind of single for a while, and You ever meet Sakaguchi, the
yeah.
carpenter, and you know him?
What's his name?
You know his
Hitoshi?
yeah.
Oh yeah, I know
Yeah,
him and his wife Ann. Yeah, he's a
yeah,
wild man.
yeah.
He's a wild man.
He's a wild man. Well, I
He is
dated
the
her for a while.
worst Japanese alcoholic I ever ran into.
Yeah, well, I took him to Europe with me, but anyway, but I dated her before she knew Sakaguchi.
Mm-hmm. Oh, really?
After, yeah, just for a while.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, just a more coincidence kind of thing, and then Len had moved into that house. I moved into the house in Yoshinji, and I went and lived there with him, and then we worked. I worked for Kizawa. I worked for what were their names? I don't remember. Four brothers who were the incredible woodworkers.
Are you talking about in America or
No, in Kyoto.
In Kyoto? Oh, yeah. All right. Just wanted to make sure because you were back in
I went to
America
work
working on the Tans.
just for like 2 months. Then I came back to Japan.
Yeah, and then you went back to Japan. All right.
And then I had to break up with the family, and then I left the country. I left the job. I left the job in the country, and I ended up working for this Hosome Gumi, the four brothers, the Hosome brothers.
Mm.
Anyway, they were an amazing group of woodworkers. The four brothers, they were kind of magical. Anyway, and we built a 2-story romon, one of those like a sanmon, only for a Shinto shrine, in the heart of Tokyo at Kanda Byojin, right in the heart of Tokyo.
Oh.
So we cut it all out in Kyoto and then trucked it up there and went up there and lived. 8 of us lived in an 8-bath room and worked 28 days a month.
Oh wow.
29. We took 2 days a month off.
Wow.
Anyway, sun light, first light to first to dark. It was intense.
Wow.
And then when that job was finished, we came back, and then they started wanting me to take responsibility. They wanted me to take responsibility for work, and they started expecting me to act like a Japanese, and it just became too much, and that's when I came home.
And what year was that?
Center. That was, I think it was the very beginning of 76. The end of 67, 76, somewhere in there.
Oh, I remember when you came back. I remember. I set up that dinner at Sim Vandren's for you to, meet him and J.B. Blount and Gordon Ashby and other people. Yeah, 76. That makes sense.
Anyway, I had a hell of a time, but I kept coming back. It's really hard on me.
Yeah, you were living across the street from Page Street.
Oh, yeah, that was later, yeah, but at some point it was, yeah.
Oh, that was later, because you were living with Gloria there. You were with Gloria, I remember.
Yeah, that was later, yeah.
That was later, all right.
I came back to the Green Gulch, I think. And then Maya came out to live with me. And that was horrendous. And then Dick shipped me off to Tassajara, and he put Maya under Barton's tutelage.
Oh.
Who leched on her severely.
Oh. How old was she?
Anyway, 13, 14.
Oops.
But she looked 24. I mean, she she was amazing. I mean, she was voluptuous and beautiful skin and beautiful coloring and beautiful curves. And
whose daughter was she?
A woman named Karen Clacken.
And she was your daughter. She was your daughter.
Yeah.
Where is she now?
She's in Richmond. She's here. I have lunch with her periodically.
Oh, that's neat. That's neat. Huh. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So you went down to Tassajara then? Ah.
Yeah. Worked in the kitchen, I think, with I think I was in the kitchen with the woman that was just retired from Greens, Annie Summerfield.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Was there any talk about you doing any carpentry work?
Well, I finished the Kaisando.
Oh, yeah, I remember. Oh, yes, of course.
Because it was just a foundation when I left.
Right, right.
And I think one summer.
Yeah, you
I
have
did
to
the
remind
Kaisando
me
one
these
summer.
things. My mind's a blank
And,
when you say that.
And then at some point I did Green's Restaurant in '77.
Oh, right. That was 79,
77,
78,
I think.
Well,
78,
it opened in 79 in the spring.
Well, I remember 77, but I don't know.
But 77 is when you started working on it, maybe.
Maybe that's when they started, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Don't have a real good chronological apparatus. Anyway.
Wow. Yeah. Ah. Green.
And then I worked on the Wheelwright Center when I first got back. That was
right.
With John Ewald. Remember John Ewald?
Oh yes. Yeah.
He made Trump look like a Sunday school boy as far as lying went. You could not tell the truth for the help his soul. But he was personable, friendly.
Uh-huh.
Anyway.
Now what was his role there?
He was just a local builder that they'd engaged to build. You know, had talked his way in. He's a real talker.
Yeah. And what was
but
his?
He'd gotten.
Was he involved with Wheelwright?
The Wheelwright Center.
Uh-huh.
They got in the foundation in, and they got up to the first floor, but then they couldn't figure out how to do the roof because there was a contradiction in heights and stuff. Anyway, so I took over from there and built that covered walkway and put the roof on the building and interior finishes and that stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Beautiful building.
And then I started on the octagonal in the Lindisfarne.
You started what?
Lindisfarne, the octagonal building.
Uh-huh. Now, what's the first building you were talking about?
The Wheelwright Center. You know, the one right there in the middle of camp.
Oh, right, of course. Oh, yeah.
By the library.
I was getting confused. Ken Sawyer was involved with that too, wasn't he?
He was involved with that too. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, a lot of people involved with that.
Yeah, and I'd forgotten all about John Ewald, so I was just going, oh, John Ewald, wow. Yeah. The Lindisfarne building, that's beautiful. Did you design that or what?
Yeah, well, Sim and I worked on it. It was Sim's concept. I did 13 sets of drawings for it of different sizes and relationships.
Wow.
But Sim had the original concept of 8 sides and that rectangles and triangle roof. Anyway. But I turned it into a timber frame building and
a what?
And worked on it. Timber frame, you know.
I'm sorry, I just didn't understand.
Yeah. Anyway, that was, and Dick tried to get away with it, calling it an agricultural building, but you get a permit.
Sounds like him. That's great.
Yeah. But I made sure that it was all properly engineered. I had Jeffrey Barrett engineer it all.
Oh, right.
And so then when we got shut down, why we hadn't done anything everything we done was up to code.
And that wonderful woodworking building that you put in that was built out of eucalyptus poles and
that was
what sort of corrugated metal or
corrugated metal and eucalyptus poles and number 9 wire. Those are the kind of buildings I'd worked in Japan.
You know what Jeffrey Barrett told me about that building? He said it defies everything he knew about engineering that building didn't blow down.
Well, it was Japanese engineering.
Wow. He was very impressed with it. I loved it.
Well, it was interesting because we cut the poles when they were green, but we didn't have time to let them dry, so we built it with green poles, and then they shrunk, and all the bindings got loose, so they all sort of slipped, and so it got this sort of hump top in it. It was sort of it sort of had these curves in the roof and everything, and that was because that wasn't intentional. It was all straight and even when we built it.
Ah, and the sawmill. Were you involved in getting the sawmill there?
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah, of course. Where did that come from?
That was in Sevastopol, believe it or not, and had been sitting
No
out
kidding.
in the yard, sitting out in a yard in a lot somewhere, and I don't remember. There was this guy. What was his name? Oh boy, Jeffrey
Hayden. Oh, that's Jeffrey Hayden.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I know Jeffrey.
You know
That's
Jeffrey,
a wild
right?
man.
Oh yeah. Anyway, I think he found it, but I'm not sure.
That's right.
If he didn't find it, at least we hired him, by the way, to help us with the diesel engine. He was supposed to be a diesel mechanic.
Yeah.
And anyways, that's another long story I don't need to go into tonight.
Yeah.
Not all about that. And that ended up going to Minneapolis, back to Minneapolis country property.
Right. I remember that. I wonder if it's still there. I mean that.
I don't know. I really don't know. I lectured at what was it called? Never can remember the name of the place.
Oh, the
Ancient
the country
Dragon.
place,
Ancient Dragon.
Katagiri's country place.
No, it's Chicago. Ancient Dragon.
Ancient Dragon, right? Tigan told me you did, right?
Yeah, and after the lecture, some of the questions were talking about. Somebody's talking about having spent time at that country, the Minneapolis country place, and I got credit for some of the buildings there that wasn't actually true, but I didn't argue with them. but I didn't ask about the sawmill. It was too much. But I thought about it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, now there at one point you wanted to, like, you had this idea of retiring at Tassajara and building a whole temple complex down at Grasshopper Flats. Is that something you came up with Richard, or?
No, that was Suzuki Roshi. Before I left for Japan, I said I was out of Grasshopper Flats with him, and I described my idea of building a traditional temple there. And he said, yes, you should do that. And then I went to Japan. And then when I came back, first I was kind of fucked up because it was a cultural shock. I was very happy in Japan, but America drove me crazy. And then I got a lot of flack from people. And then when I was
got a lot of flack about what?
Just being a male, being, I don't know, whatever.
All right.
And then after my transmission, I was planning to go to Tassajara and retire.
Wait a minute, transmission from?
Oh, I got it's through Dick, Suzuki Roshi to Dick, to Reb, to me. But Hoitsu Hoitsu and Coben were both there for it.
Oh, that's wonderful. What year was that?
89 maybe, or 88. I don't know. I don't really remember. Somewhere in there, and I don't. That's really fuzzy in my head. I don't know, because I was in Europe until the Loma Prieta earthquake. I was coming back when the earthquake happened, and then I was at Zen Center for only a short time. And I don't think maybe I got transmission before I went to Austria. I don't remember. I really don't remember. I should be able to look at my Roxy and see. But anyway, not that I care especially, but anyway, and I wanted to go to Tassajara. I wanted to retire at Tassajara. I wanted to be, that's my rest. I wanted to die there. And I wanted to build a traditional temple there. But that was not the mood of the community at the time. So I wanted at that time. I wanted to retire to Tassajara, and Leslie was the president. It was a whole girls rule scene then. And then I'd taken 10 guys to Rinso Inn, and did a month-long session there in Rinso Inn.
I saw you there. I visited you there.
Okay. Yeah. So, and I really got off on doing that. I thought that was a fun thing to do. And then at Zen Center, when I was leaving, Zen Center offered me $12,000 to start a small Zendo somewhere. But I don't know. It didn't strike me as being interesting.
I understand, absolutely.
And although I'd been at Berkeley Zendo, well, Mel was Shuso down at Tassajara for a practice period for a winter, and I loved that. It was one of the happiest times of my life.
Oh, that's a wonderful place. I love it.
And a whole bunch of great people joined it. Blanche joined. I recruited Blanche and Ravain Ben Human and what's her name? The cook, the Deborah Madison.
Oh, really?
Deborah's. So I had this idea that I could have a woodworking practice half the year and a retreat practice half the year, and I was looking for land somewhere, and I was looking around and looking. But then once I got jobs and employees, and I ran out of shop and insurance policies, and it just ran away with me, and I never got back to them. I never got back to the retreat practice part. But now I always fought with Reb was always about the word. In the beginning, there's the word, which I think is part of the Bible or something.
That's right.
I always argue with him about that, and now that I'm studying Dogen with him now in this class, this Zoom class every Friday, and we're reading, we're talking about studying Buddhism and studying what can't be said, using words to say what can't be said. So he took the word part, and I took the can't be said part, and so I tried for, how long is that? That was 30 years. To express the Dharma in physical form to a very limited. I don't know. I felt I wasn't too successful. Anyway, so now I realize that you have to do both. And that because I always thought the people who run around lecturing, somebody come in and lecture here, then fly off and lecture over there, but that's pointless. I mean, it's just a bunch of empty words that people are going to interpret however they feel like interpreting it. But just having people, shovel shit all day and tell them that's the Dharma doesn't work either. So,
that's great.
So now in my very late in life, now that I'm almost half dead, I'm starting to talk about Buddhism verbally.
hence that lecture at Ancient Dragon.
Well, I guess I'd better be running along and let you. Let's see. It's
I'm running out of fuel here, so
yeah, it's your bedtime.
It's my bedtime. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Hey, thanks for all that. That was terrific.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed talking with you very much.
Yeah, that's really interesting stuff. I love it. I love it. And I really think it's best you didn't retire at Tassajara. That would have been a can of worms.
Oh, who knows? I mean, probably so. Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah,
everything's for the best. Everything's for the best in this best of all possible worlds.
Yeah,
Remember
that
was
Voltaire.
Voltaire, yeah.
Yeah,
He studied Buddhism too.
No, wait a minute. That was not Voltaire. Voltaire's the one that tore that one apart. That was a guy. That was a guy named Leibniz.
Oh no, that was he was saying it facetiously. That was that.
Yeah. He wrote Candide. That totally.
Yeah.
There was a guy named Leibniz, I think, who said this is the best
Leibniz,
of all possible worlds. And
that's right.
Voltaire wrote Candide, saying, "Oh bullshit! Read this story."
Yeah, but if you read Candide, it comes out where it's true.
Oh, well, but everything sort of goes to shit. But
everything goes to shit, but it turns out perfect at the end.
Yeah. All right. So he saw the complexity of it.
I don't know what Voltaire saw, but anyway, that's the way I see it.
Yeah.
And if it could be different, it would. So of course it's the best of possible worlds. Otherwise, it'd be a different world.
Yeah. I can go with that. Yeah.
And what's his name also was influenced that way. The God is dead.
Nietzsche.
Nietzsche. Yeah. He was also highly influenced by Buddhism.
Huh? Is that right?
Well, yeah, by that thinking anyway. Yeah.
Huh.
There was a lot of those early philosophers were understood that the basic concept of the mind and of suffering. Anyway,
yeah.
I'm starting to drift sideways here. So
that's good. I
better let you go. Is it morning there for you?
No. It's like let me see, 10:30, 11:30, 12. It's probably a quarter of one, or no, 10:30, 11:30, 10:30. I called you around 10:30, 11:30, 12:30.
Oh, it's midday.
Yeah, it's like a quarter of one.
The sun's up.
All right, so yeah, it's midday.
Yeah,
midday.
Yeah, midday. Yeah, very good.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, great talking to you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
All right, take care.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. So thanks a lot, Paul Discoe. That was great. I got more to ask. Paul. I got to get hold of him again. Yeah, he's something, huh? That was actually 2 phone calls that I snippeted together. Okay, so until we meet again, this is DC Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, coming to you from Sleepy Sanur with Dogga Bandita, Feline Cuchita, and dear lovely Katrinka. And we're wishing you and yours and all of us a grand awakening.